Hi everyone, welcome to chapter 28 of The Silver Sword, The Meeting. When we last left our family, they had been separated and we were in a boat in the middle of the storm in the middle of Lake Constance. Like I think it said, facing their greatest challenge yet. Let's see what happens. Chapter 28, The Meeting. It was dark when Ruth opened her eyes. She was being lifted up. A man's voice said, "It's a girl, thin as a string of seaweed and wringing wet. How you feeling, eh? We nearly ran you down in the dark." He spoke in a strange language which Ruth did not understand. She tried to speak, but no words came. "She's worrying about something," said the man. "Better take her below and get some dry clothes on her," said someone else. Her mind drifted to a blank. When she woke again, she was lying in a bunk. There was a light above her, dry blankets around her, and a flicker of warmth in her limbs. "Where am I?" she said. Strange faces peered down at her from the sky. There was a cup at her lips. "Feed her slowly," a man was saying. "Don't give her too much or she'll be sick." The cup came back again, and biscuits too. She sat up. "Edith, Bronia, Jan!" she cried. "Polish names," said a woman's voice. I said she was Polish. "Anyone talk Polish here?" "Tell her about the others," a man said. "Don't know the language." There was a general cry of, "Anyone talk Polish?" And Ruth, frightened by the unfamiliar faces, cried out again, "Edith, Bronia, Jan!" And suddenly from the back of the crowd she heard the echo, "Edith, Bronia, Jan!" in a deep voice. Dazed and bewildered though she was, she knew it for her father's voice. Now she was gathered in his arms, smothered with his kisses. She tried to speak, to listen to what he was saying, but her head was throbbing, and she was too tired to keep her eyes open. When she woke again, her father's face was close to hers. "You've been asleep a long time," he said. "Try to stay awake, and I'll show you what you want to see." The blankets pressed around her, and she felt herself being lifted from the bunk. "Look down there," said Joseph. She saw, in a nest of blankets, Bronia's sleeping head. There was a flush of colour on the child's cheeks, and she was snoring. "Nothing much wrong with her," said Joseph, and he carried Ruth to the next bunk. She looked again and saw Edic's face. It was very white, and he was lying still and as straight as a post. "Is he breathing?" she said. "Yes, he's breathing," said Joseph, "but only just," and he carried her quickly away and showed her Jan. He was sitting on his blankets, dangling his legs over the edge of the bunk. There was a glint of mischief in his eyes. "They're a feeble lot, the Beliskis," he said. "They would have all drowned if it hadn't been for me. Ruth, you're crazy. Fancy going for a sail in weather like this, and thinking you could manage without me. And you use an oar like a soup spoon. And when a little water comes in the boat, you faint." I had to find Edic's boat and steer ours to it. I shouted at him to help, but he fainted too. The water was nearly up to his neck, so I pulled him over the side into our boat. 2 seconds before his turned over and sunk. Joseph patted his cheek affectionately. "Eat up your bread and cheese and stop boasting," he said. "If you say any more, you'll go off pop." Ruth reached out her arms to Jan and gave him a hug. "You ought to be made an admiral at once," she said. "Thank God they're safe, all 3 of them." And then she flung her arms around her father's neck. "You've got the numbers wrong. I haven't finished yet." "Hey, don't strangle me," he said, and he carried her out of the cabin. "There were only 3, said Ruth. "What do you mean?" "The last and the best surprise," said Joseph, opening another door. "I tried to tell you over the phone, but I couldn't make myself heard." The cabin was small, and there was only one person in it. She'd been waiting for the door to open. Her eyes were wide with expectation, her arms stretched out in welcome. "Mother," said Ruth, and with a happiness that no words could describe, she slipped from her father's arms into those other arms, so eager to receive her. It seemed like 100 years since she had last seen her mother, on that sad and brutal occasion when the Nazi stormtroopers had dragged her down the steps of their Warsaw home. She had been in a concentration camp until, after months of patient searching, Joseph had traced her through the Red Cross. But that was another story. 4 years of suffering had turned her hair quite white, and there were deep lines in her face. But Ruth's heart was so full that she only saw the joy and the happiness there. And she thought of the Daniel story, which she had told so often to her school children. Now for her, as for Daniel, deliverance had come at last. Mother was sitting beside you all the time you were sleeping, said Joseph. She went away when you woke up. We didn't want to give you too many shocks at once. There was a knock on the door. Without waiting for an answer, Jan came in, his mouth full of bread and cheese. Ruth, I meant to tell you, I haven't got my treasure box anymore, he said. I was so busy rescuing Edith that I forgot all about it. I suppose it's at the bottom of the lake now. But the silver sword, cried Ruth. Is that lost too? Everything in the box is lost, said Jan ruefully. Now the fishers will have my treasures. As they're not secrets anymore, I can tell you what they were. 2 cat's claws, a gold curtain ring, and the buttons off a German uniform. Half a pen nib and an acorn. A stick of Russian shaving cream with some hairs from Ivan's chin stuck to it. Frau Wolf's tin opener. A silver teaspoon from the house in Berlin where the English soldier lived. You didn't know I kept that, did you, Ruth? The brightest feather in Jimpy's tail. That was precious. And 3 dead fleas from the hairy chest of Bristow the chimpanzee. Bristow gave them to me himself, and I shall miss them dreadfully. For one who had suffered so shattering a loss, he did not look as grief-stricken as you might have expected. His eyes were prouder than his words. But the sword, said Ruth, who had found it hard to wait for the catalogue to end. I gave it to you. I know I did. I saw you put it in the box and... Ah, the sword, said Jan, pulling a long face. He looked at Joseph. If I'd had lost the sword, we should never have found you again. He bared his chest, and there hanging from a string around his neck was the silver sword. He untied the sword and handed it to Ruth's mother. This is my most precious treasure, he said. Joseph gave it to me, but it's yours now. You can keep it forever, if you'll be my mother. Well, there we go. We're looking towards a happy ending. Chapter 28, The Meeting. Only 4 questions to answer today, and then I want you to draw and label the treasures in Jan's wooden box. Got a chance to practice your skills with your Apple Pencil, explain everything, and draw away his treasures. You might like to draw the outside of the box as well. 1 chapter to go, chapter 29, The New Beginning, and we'll listen to that and read that tomorrow.